libertarian, how I came to think about all these things and hold these views. And you might think that that's not really that relevant. The process by which I got to these views maybe is not important. What matters is whether the arguments are persuasive. But I think this particular anecdote that I'll present helps to see one specific aspect of libertarianism, which is that it has a kind of consistency that people find appealing. Then I'm going to talk about how I ended up teaching a course on this at Harvard, and how I ended up writing a book about it. Again, that might not seem directly relevant, except that the process by which I did that and the particular way in which I taught this course and developed this book, I think will help illustrate the aspect of libertarianism, or the kind of libertarianism that I think is interesting and convincing. Then I'll talk about what the book does, not all of the details or all the conclusions in the book, that would take far too long, but mainly the book's perspective, something called consequential libertarianism as opposed to philosophical libertarianism. Okay? That's an incredibly important difference to understand, although I'll argue that they're actually the same thing, but they use different language. And then finally, I want to end with one somewhat more detailed example to go through a libertarian perspective on one issue. The issue I'll talk about is drug legalization. And it's an interesting issue. It's a good issue for me because I've done a lot of research on that particular topic. And that issue is also one that is widely associated with libertarians, on which many libertarians have taken a stance, and where there's a pretty strong consistency amongst libertarians on exactly what would be good or bad on that particular point. So before I start with any details, let me emphasize again, nothing that I'm going to say tonight is going to make you a libertarian if you're not one already, so you don't have to worry that you're going to get brainwashed. But I hope it will make you curious, and I hope it will make you think, gee, that is an interesting way to think about the world, so maybe it's worth thinking about it some more, paying attention when people talk about it in other settings. If I accomplish that, I think I will have done what I set out to do. Now, before I can explain how I got to be a libertarian, I need to define it a bit. Okay? In the simplest terms, libertarians believe in small government, really small government, but not zero government. There's a very important distinction between anarchists, who argue for literally no government whatsoever, and libertarians who argue for much, much less than we have now, but still some very particular parts of government. Now, how much smaller do I mean when I say really small? In the case of the U.S., I would suggest that the U.S. ideally would eliminate every policy, every government program, every department of this, that, or the other, everything that's been created since the 90s, and I mean the 1790s. Okay, so I'm talking about a really radical change in government. Of course, the U.S. had some government in 1791 when it first came into being, but it was very, very small, like this. Now, to be a bit more specific, okay, libertarians oppose all of the following policies, and much, much more I won't have time to list. In the economic area, libertarians oppose government regulation of the production and sale of medicines, of licensing of doctors or lawyers or any other kind of profession. Libertarians oppose housing subsidies, rent control laws, minimum wages, antitrust laws, consumer protection laws, and so forth. Libertarians oppose government spending on health insurance, government provision of income security, government provision of retirement plans, and all related policies. Libertarians are also opposed to government attempts to stabilize the overall economy, to use monetary and fiscal policy to try to eliminate business cycles or to moderate business. In the area of social policy, okay, libertarians are again against the vast range of current interventions. They're opposed to prohibitions against vice, prohibitions against drugs, prohibitions against prostitution, pornography, gambling, and so on. Libertarians believe all those things should be fully legal, treated like any other commodity. Libertarians are in favor of legalizing gay marriage. They were really, really consistent, and really, for deep libertarians, are actually opposed to any government involvement in marriage at all. There would be no government marriages, same-sex or opposite-sex, but at a minimum, the government should stop discriminating between those two kinds and provide marriage on an equal basis, the same-sex and opposite-sex